Superintendent, you had...
I just want to thank the staff for this thoughtful presentation. I should tell the audience this is actually the first time I'd seen it in its entirety myself, and it will be posted on our website within 24 hours so everybody can peruse not only the presentation but the appendices, which begin to have many of the discussions that I'm sure the board would like to have. It turns out that the expectation of the board for me to do an update with this actually opened up a system-wide discussion on how do we make sure that we not only recruit but induct, sustain, evaluate, and expand the knowledge and professional base of every employee in the district, which basically touches every division in our system, including, I should say, special education, which has in some ways been treated separately, or I should say, what is PEC? Our Program for Exceptional Children staff. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to look at this as actually one of those internal system levers that our Chief of Staff always talks about. But to actually get this right means that every school, every child in the district will be benefiting. So we've really hit on something that's very powerful and very important. And the staff is now ready for any questions from the board.
Okay, board members, any questions? Director Torres?
So with regard to the fact that over the past 11 months, I haven't heard, I've met a few of the TFA teachers. This is about TFA. I've met a few who are incredible and been here 6, 7 years and love their job, love that they came here with the expectation of 2 years to get their, to meet their contract requirement and then get their reduction of their student loan, and fell in love with the kids. On the other side of that, though, is those same teachers have said the majority of TFA teachers at my particular school, and it's a high school, they speak of the kids as those kids don't pass tests and those kids are never going to college anyway. And I was shocked to hear this from this teacher. But so my question for you is, just because they're changing their policy to include people of color, I still don't think our children deserve to have a teacher be fly-by-night and come for 24 months, 2 years, and then leave to go for their 6-figure salary in corporate America, get their reduction of their student loan, because they don't need it going to corporate America. So is there a way to just get rid of TFA regardless to changing the skin tone of people? I don't know that it still works for our kids. Or is there a possibility of putting all of those TFA teachers, if you're so committed to hiring them, at schools that have the least turnover, like a Montclair, a Thornhill, what have you? Because I also know there's very many at, for instance, student director Carmen Jimenez school. She has a lot of TFA, and they have turnover constantly. So that's a school that can't sustain constant new teachers, and then to give them teachers who have a goal of only 2 years, possibly, even worse, about watering down the quality of instruction, because that's what I've learned in 11 years from that program, and it doesn't seem like we have to have it, because then we can really put our resources in Teach Tomorrow Oakland, which I really applaud and support, and even that program, as I see, 28% of the hires were Caucasian teachers. So it's going to be a while before we get to the equity, which you use that word, before we get to the equity for the percentage of our student body. Latinos 38% and the teachers 11, so that's a jump from last year, so I appreciate that. Same thing with the African American teachers, 21% is a jump, getting closer to the amount of students who are 30%, so that's exciting. But I just don't know about the fact that TFA has changed their policy that I wanted in our schools. I personally don't. So that's my question. Can we do something about that?
As I mentioned, the priority of HR is to ensure that we have a qualified teacher in every classroom at the beginning of school and throughout the school year. And at this time, we do still rely on the capacity that Teach for America brings to us, particularly with regard to staffing hard-to-staff subject areas. I am not confident that without the partnership of TFA, we would be able to have a qualified candidate, a qualified individual in every classroom for the start of the school year. We are deeply invested in building our own internal capacity, but at this time, we do feel that the partnership is necessary to ensure that we have qualified and credentialed individuals, particularly in those very difficult to staff subject areas.
Director Dobbins.
Great, thank you. And following up on Director Torres, because I shared many of the same concerns, and I'm meeting, I guess, with some folks from Teach for America next week. You know, we use that term a lot. It's what, 70% or something within 5 years we have the turnover. Ms. Marshall, do you have any sense of statistics on during exit interviews or whatever information you've gathered? How much of that is dissatisfaction with our district for whatever reason, and maybe how much would be, you know, hey, you know, the young people, maybe they're either in their, you know, mid to late 20s, they've done, you know, 3-4 years, they just want to do something else. I mean, do you have any sense of that?
Unfortunately not, because we don't have a comprehensive human capital data management system. We don't do exit surveys currently. We don't have the capacity to do that. And our attrition data actually is not solid right now. We've done our best over the past couple of years to put together a database sense of our teacher retention rates, but it's not solid, it's not complete, it's not comprehensive data. That's exactly what we're building towards, so we can do exactly that kind of analysis so that we can focus our resources more shrewdly around particular recruitment strategies and certainly retention strategies that we know are going to be successful at holding and helping teachers to be successful with our children in Oakland. And
so maybe just from, obviously you don't have, you know, hard numbers, but your empirical kind of talking to people, hearing what they say, would you say it's across the board why people leave?
I think there are very many different reasons. The teachers who join us from Teach for America make a commitment for 2 years at least. Many of them do fall in love with our students and stay for longer, and we have many accomplished leaders actually in the district who started as teachers through the Teach for America program. So clearly there's a value in giving people the opportunity to work with our children and develop a commitment to them. I think the reasons are extremely varied, from compensation to conditions to everything in between.
No, I got you. Okay, and then my other question was on, you talked about the evaluation systems, one of my kind of ongoing discussion topics, I think, with yourself. And when this topic comes up is in terms of evaluation, in terms of, you know, when I was teaching, I always felt a lot of times it was personal. So whether if the principal liked me, I got better than maybe I deserved. If they didn't like me, I got worse. And I know now, I know Mr. Townsend, we had a discussion before many times. It seems to be more kind of take the human element out of it,
I think you turned your microphone off, Director Dobbins.
Okay, sorry. So that'd be my first question is, you know, I see there's some systems, and maybe it's in the appendix. I haven't, you know, we just got this, so I haven't seen that yet. But also, the value in something like this is, to me, was what that conversation after. Okay, this is what you did, okay or great, but this is really what you can do better. And I think probably a lot of conversations for our younger teachers is in classroom management issues, and where is that in terms of, hey, I have, you know, Miss London down the hall and she's great at it, boom, you know, so where's that indicated in here?
I am going to invite Aaron Townsend to speak to that, but I would just say, again, with regard to having a human capital data management system, that's exactly the opportunity that it presents to us in real time to look at data, not just on who is struggling, and areas that we can identify are fairly common and consistent where teachers need additional support, but also where teachers are excelling and teachers who can be identified as mentors and guides and supports to other teachers. It gives us the opportunity to identify that strong practice and make best use of it.
Yeah, good evening. So I heard you touch on three things real quick. One was just kind of the notion of the expansion from a source of data about a teacher. It's just, you know, the thing about it gets personal, right, between a teacher and a principal. And so each of the efforts in the evaluation pilots is seeking to have a few different measures, right, so that we can, and there's a focus on the collection of evidence, so it's a really evidence-driven process, so we can try and move past, as much as possible, that notion of it's just somebody's out to get me, right? And we can have some more deeper conversations about the practice that's in play in service of helping people to reflect and grow and learn. So even the online systems that we use for the observation encourage that kind of reflection, different than how our current tools operate. Our current tools ask for ratings first and then justify them later, right? We believe that to really encourage and engage teachers in reflection about their own practice, we have to provide them some evidence, give them an opportunity to do some reflection, and then have the conversation about it. So the tools that we're piloting even shift that dynamic to try and create a greater learning space in terms of that post-conference and that feedback that you get. So that, and then as well to just verify one observer's assessment is not just the sole word on somebody's practice, right? But we have a few things that we try and leverage and just consider, ideally they are consistent, but if they're not, it just allows for the opportunity to provoke the question and do greater inquiry. So that's some ways that we're trying to move past that dynamic and create greater spaces of reflection for teachers and for leaders, I'll say as well, in their pilot, so that because they have to be active agents in their own learning about their practice for it to really grow and improve. The second thing was just around training. So I mentioned a couple times the observer certification. I feel like it's essential to be able to control as best we can. I mean, you can't be in every observation and every post-conference, but our ability to assess, do people have the skills to be able to actually hold these conversations, do the kind of work that's needed to help teachers grow and reflect. And we feel like that's an essential component moving forward of continuing to invest in that. And then the last is the way that we're able to track data. The example I've referenced on page 22, there's an additional report that goes next. That was like averages, I think is what we included for each of the indicators. You can break that out so that you can see who actually scored the 4 on some of the classroom management things, and it calls up and you can identify those exact teachers, right? So you could be enabled to say, okay, you go see that person. Now, obviously in a smaller school, those generally just affirms your working knowledge, right? But in larger schools and then across the system, as we're trying to identify pockets of excellence, right, it allows us the opportunity to track that. And again, we have no ability to kind of recognize that except just kind of anecdotally. We're always forever saying, who do you know? Who do you know? This would be able to give us real-time ongoing data about where people are really hitting various elements, whatever it is. We have a strategic focus on academic discussion now, right? And so we're really looking for areas of practice where that's happening and happening really well to help people learn and grow. You could look at that indicator that's related to that academic discussion. Who are the people that were rated 3 or 4 in that? And that's, boom, that's your list of people to go see, to have people go and observe, right? And this begins to beg questions of how we recognize and celebrate those high performers.
Okay, to pass to my colleague, but my final point, I mean, although that part, sharing evaluations, does that bring up privacy concerns? So.
Well, it's not, you would never share somebody's evaluation, right? But you would know.
Highlight,
right?
Okay, so Miss London got a 4 out of 5, whatever.
Right, yeah, we're not going and talking about Miss London's evaluation, but we know that she's somebody who has some excellence in this practice, right?
You should see her in action. So final point is and being here from Oakland and being proud that, my 10 best friends from on Skyline, 6 of us are in education, 5 in Oakland. I'm proud Dr. Epstein's in the audience. We went through a great program at Cal State Hayward with her, so I appreciate, I'm publicly thank Dr. Epstein for all your hard work. So I mean, I think people do, even if your role changes in the system, but if you're still all education advocates, we applaud it. So again, thanks for the.
Director London?
Thank you. This is really interesting and exciting work, and I want to have a few questions. I want to preface them with a couple of just general comments. First of all, I was contacted recently by 2 journalism students from Claremont Middle School, and they interviewed me for about 25 or 30 minutes on their lunch hour about why isn't the teaching force in Oakland more representative of the student body. And I thought that was a really astute observation coming from some, relatively young kids, and we had a very sophisticated and high-level conversation, and I directed them to Teach Tomorrow in Oakland. So I do think, and I agree with Director Torres, and I kind of concur with her statements there, recognizing the value that Teach for America has provided. I really like the idea that we are bringing in teachers, that we are bringing people into the teaching profession, and I did share with the students my belief that in this country in general, we undervalue our teachers and we don't assign them enough status. We don't, as a community, say we want to pay teachers more. So that's one thing, but that also leads into, I want to echo Director Dobbins's concerns around classroom management, and you don't have to answer this, but I just want to suggest that, particularly based on just the evidence I hear at the dinner table from my kids who are students in this system, the classroom management for new teachers is so important. I almost feel like saying, can't we introduce a mandatory classroom management training or tutorial or something for new teachers around how to develop a syllabus so the kids know what they're going to get from you every year. Here's how, just, you guys know, our teachers, you know better than I do what those challenges are, but it's prevalent. Both of my children have several new teachers between them, and I see the pattern. So, and also, there's so much information in here. If I would have had more time with the material, I think my questions would be more in depth, so I apologize for that. But I have three primary questions that I want to probe. First of all, the other night I hosted a town hall meeting on math and the Common Core, and one of the things that was very clear from that conversation was that as we move into a different course sequencing for math, particularly in the middle and high schools, we need to have teachers who are prepared to teach not only the main timeline, but they also need to teach the classes for kids who need additional support and the classes for kids who are accelerated. And neither I nor the parents, the many parents who came to that meeting, walked out of there confident that this district has the ability to do that in every school. So I want to make sure, and I know we have a long list of priorities, colleagues, but as we move into the budget development, that is going to be for me a really important thing. We can't move to Common Core, move to a new class sequence, and not have teachers at every school who can offer what we're promising. So I don't know if you guys want to respond to that now, but it's just an issue that has come up for me in that area.
It's an issue that we've been struggling with, and one of the things that we're doing now is we're partnering with Mills College to develop a teacher residency program specifically around math and science. And again, back to needing to really think through some innovative strategies around recruitment. It's a definite challenge, but that's one of the things that we're doing is we've engaged in a planning grant and trying to figure out how we can strategically use kind of like teacher residencies, having folks be a student teacher first and matched with a teacher as a way to kind of keep folks who are interested.
I couldn't support that more. I think that's really good. My second question is around, and I know these are just pilots, so we're not there yet, but how is this going to lead to career pathways for our teachers and for our principals? I think we have a lot of talent in our district, and we haven't really made it clear to people. I don't know if our principals are ever asked, what do you want to do when you're done being a principal? The teachers may need a break from being a teacher, a sabbatical year of doing something different. How does that integrate into this?
Yes, I mean, it's something we're thinking about a lot, and agree that it is a logical next step for us to explore in the development of these systems, right? That we're able to kind of call out and articulate and formulate what would those pathways be, and those ladders and opportunity. We even talk about them almost as lattices, because a ladder implies just one direction, but It may be up and down and back, right, to provide multiple opportunities for continued career growth and exploration. So I'd say one aspect of that answer, again, is the practice of evaluation, right, in which we want to shift so that people are actually having the conversation you just named, right? You're right. I don't think that happens. That has not been a stated expectation that people have that conversation, right? And it's one of the small aspects, but important, that we want to shift around our evaluation practice additionally.
Even having the supervisor, so in the case of the principal, even having their regional officer say to them when they're being evaluated, so where do you see yourself in 3 years? That sends a signal to people that we want them here and that we see a future for them in Oakland. So, and then I have just a final observation / question. As I was leafing through the appendices, it looks like maybe a third to a half of the teachers are taking advantage of the professional learning. I don't know how many of there's like 1,021 who did the professional learning this summer, or whatever the time frame is. How many of those are repeats? And are we sure that all of our teachers are taking advantage of the professional development opportunities, the intensives that you're offering?
That's another rationale for having our human capital database system. There definitely needs to be more teachers taking advantage of it. But again, back to time, summer is a very busy time of year where we're offering professional learning. Many times people decide to do other professional learning, and so trying to think differently around time and offering it, yes, in the summertime, but having other opportunities during the school year. But I'm happy to go back and kind of unpack the data for you to give you some of those answers.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because that would be my hope, that I don't think there's like a professional, like lawyers or doctors they have to get the continuing education credits. I don't know that that's in effect for teachers, but it seems like that would be something that, to build this culture of ongoing learning, that would be something we'd want to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, Director Harris, and the Madam Vice President, and then Director Washington, and then I'm going to take myself, and we got student directors, so. Director Harris?
I'm not clear on how teachers in low-income areas, and especially principals in low-income areas, these are the areas where we have highest turnover. Are you uncovering any evidence on how we will begin to wrestle with this issue of turnover? So it's one thing to evaluate a teacher. It's another thing to evaluate a teacher who just got there, and then the next year they just got there, and then the next year the principal's new. And so how do we begin to manage the putting out of fires that's going on at schools like Castlemont, Alliance, I saw in this packet as well. Are you beginning to see any symbol of how we will deal with that in terms of how we evaluate our teachers while we're also trying to retain our teachers? That's my first question.
I just recognize the point that, evaluation not necessarily as a means of retention, right? But though we do want to shift it from people's current experience with it to one that does feel meaningful. I think as we called out in that last slide that Ms. Johnson-Trammell spoke to, that last need is, what is our strategy? I think we have not had a comprehensive strategy about what that could look like. That obviously involves, kind of provokes our questions about our agreements with both potentially our administrators' unions and our teachers' unions about what would it take and what do we mean, right? There's ways that have been tried nationally around incentivizing, right? Placement in those schools monetarily, right? It's not clear that that may be the strategy for us in Oakland, right? But what else might be the conditions that need to be in place to make that true? We know that there have been a number of schools in the K-8. One of the structures this year is providing some additional wraparound supports in some of the K-8 schools through the directors of instruction to be able to provide some additional supports around the work there to try and establish and create the collaborative culture that was mentioned at that site that we know can then create the space for people to want to buy in and stay. The work that we've been engaged and heard about from Michael Fullen around the notion of the kind of social capital at a school is that we need to build up that social capital at the school where it's a place where people feel connected to the vision of the school, people feel connected and supported and engaged with their colleagues there to be able to stay and begin to interrupt. But we also know we need to find some avenues to bring in experienced people because it is just a vicious pattern where we have folks who are the majority that don't have that experience, and structurally in terms of our ability to assign people to schools and to be able to attract people to those schools. We don't have anything structurally in place to do that, and I think that that needs to be an area for us as a organization and us with our labor partners to consider to how we prioritize those schools, because we know which schools these are, and those have been those same schools forever, right? And so how do we interrupt that?
So just to the ground, you're doing the pilot at Castlemont right now?
Yes, one of the pilots, the Teaching Excellence Network, yep.
Right, so now what are you, so I hear when I go to Castlemont, I'm not at all supported. I wish I had instructional leadership, and this is from a good majority of the staff there. So how are you responding to that? Because they are not feeling that, all this is great on paper, but it's not translating to those teachers in the highest need areas.
So I'll name the Teaching Excellence Network. The pilot that's in place at Castlemont and at Met West is being facilitated by an external organization through the organization iSeed, through the work of Jeff Duncan Andrade. And the Urban Teacher Quality Index is the framework that they've used to kind of assess, and that's really is intended to be a teacher-driven model around providing support and coaching. So their initial implementation is using their Urban Teacher Quality Index to identify a couple of core from, I believe it's 30 some odd potential indicators to identify a small subset that both teachers, families, and students identify as the priorities for Castlemont. And so there's an engagement of a surveying process that they've gone through and are kind of going through and collecting the data of what are the key indicators for Castlemont, and around which then they will elicit student feedback and teacher feedback around who are the teachers within that school that provide, that are examples of that and can be levers to be able to create support across teachers. So there's a bit, I would say in the immediate, there's some ramp up. I mean, we talked about just ramp up of all of these systems. I think in that case, there's this time to get the priorities set for Castlemont through that framework and identify the folks who can be positioned to create that support. But it is, just to name, a system that really does focus the locus of instructional support on colleagues at the colleague level, and not, and so that's where instructional leadership is driven from.
Just one more question, sorry about that. And then I'm just to be clear on the human capital data management system, on the rollout, why does it take so long?
So we really don't have a system currently. We have data in multiple different places, some of it in particular systems. We have our substitute system, for example. We have OnTrack that collects professional development information. We have IFAS, which is actually a financial management system, but it collects some of our personnel information. It's clear that we're going to need to purchase a technology, but it's not clear yet exactly what we need that technology to be able to do. So we're doing this needs analysis to get really clear about all of the different data components we need to be able to collect, analyze, and have spat out at us, all of the different systems that the district currently uses that we need to be able to pull data from. And in the course of doing that needs analysis, what we've discovered is that our data is not at all clean, and that our protocols about data entry are not consistent. So we can ask a simple question of a current system, for example, how many of our teachers went to UC Berkeley? And because the data was entered in some instances as Cal Berkeley and in other instances as UC Berkeley, we're not going to get a clear answer. So we're having to go through a very careful process of sort of data hygiene in order to get to the point of being really clear about all the different data elements we want to be able to interact with, and then we can get to the point of choosing a particular technology. So the work that we're doing will benefit us in the long run, because regardless of whatever technology we purchase, garbage in, garbage out. If we don't clean up our data practices now, we will not have quality data on which to make decisions down the line when we have a more nimble system that will allow us to ask and answer really important human capital questions.
And you anticipate rollout, you see, sometime in 13-14, you said, or no?
We are going to start looking at different vendors in the early part of 2014. We need to get clear about the resources that we need to invest in whatever technology we identify. And then, of course, there's an ongoing cost. We have a couple of positions that are funded currently only for 13-14, and our ability to continue implementation and development of this system, I mean, it's system with a small s. It's not just a technology we're purchasing, it's actually building the practice of collecting the data, collecting it well, generating reports that are easy and accessible to individuals on which they can make improvement-focused decisions. All of that work has to be supported on an ongoing basis. It's not as simple as just buying a thing.
Okay, so before we go on, I want to do a time check, folks. We just come up on 1 hour on this item. We still got several other things. So, Madam Vice President, the student directors, and then myself. Oh, and Director Washington, and then myself. and the
If the student
superintendent.
director could go before me, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, Director Jimenez.
So back to the topic on Teach for America, I saw that there were a lot of conflicting views about that, whether it was positive or negative. But while that conversation was going, I was thinking to myself, how could we get students on, like, from the teachers are selected by Teach for America to go into the classroom to teach. How can we get students to get, like, to advise or to just give an input, like, whether that teacher or not is going to be, like, ideal for, like, a school? Because since, like, I can say for personal experience, in the beginning, like, give a student 1 or 2 days to see that teacher actually in action. We can tell you if that teacher is going to work out for the rest of the year or not. So I feel it's only logical that we as students have a say or like an input on whether that teacher is correct for a classroom or not, since we are the ones who are in the classroom most of the time. So, yeah.
Thank you, Director Jimenez. Our hiring decisions are ultimately made by the principals at our school sites, and very often principals do invite candidates to do a teaching demonstration if they are engaging with them during the school year when students are around. Unfortunately, many of our hiring decisions are made during the summer when students are on summer recess, so it's not possible for principals to include them in the hiring decision. But I do know that many principals do involve model teaching and invite candidates to do a lesson with the students at the school to get exactly the sense that you're describing.
Just on that, so how can we make this, like, I don't know, like a real, not recommendation, but something that is written and then something that they have to follow, that they have to have students on there? Because like I said, it's only logical that students have to be there. When I see that it's very peculiar that students aren't on that right now, so.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Vice President?
Thank you very much. I think, yes, what you're looking for is, probably some definitive kind of policy that we really could explore. And I think even the idea, we know that things happen at the last minute and during the summer, and often that's an excuse on why interims kind of get put in and parents and community members don't get to have a voice in it. But we actually don't go away from the community. So if you're hiring at West Oakland Middle School and you want to speak to a parent of a child at West Oakland Middle School, they actually don't leave the neighborhood during the summer. They actually still are there and are present and have, the ability to actually be communicated to. And I would even think that young people are not, in particular in my neighborhood, they're not going on summer vacations across the country too much or doing anything. So they're around. And so if there's some real ways, it could be a viable summer program that you have a crew of people that are on call because you do so much hiring during the summer without any real representation of community being present. So I would suggest that we kind of get away from excuses and really kind of get out of those boxes and begin to think about, if you want to have authentic young people engagement and community engagement, make that happen and figure out how it happens. Like it probably require saying to a group of parents at SSC or your PTA, can we call you on during the summer when we know that this is about to happen? So that's just a quick recommendation, and however we want to put that into a policy. I have a quick question about, so I was sitting here feeling like my constituency really should hold me accountable today. Because I thought that we had secured resources for a professional management system and that we had already identified one and that we were moving through one. And I have to say, I'm in second term, and I almost feel like I did that once before, or maybe I just got obsessed with the problem and it never quite happened. And so then eventually we set aside some resources and we know what it is. So I think what I heard, because I just want to be clear, if my constituency jams me up, which is like, okay, we just haven't identified the system and we know it's not just a thing, that it's got to be connected to people, and how do you enculturate people into actually using it? But, so I think that just, I'm hoping that the superintendent, and obviously I know that, you know, Assistant Sup of HR is gonna kind of move with this, you said in the beginning of the new year. You know, again, I come out of the nonprofit world and I'm like, go get Nation Builder or something. Like, just like, you can't track UC Berkeley to California University at Berkeley. Like, what, there's tags, there's things to kind of make systems know, oh, you may be talking about the same thing. So I know I'm oversimplifying it, but some kind of way we got to get in there and do that. I appreciated Director Harris's question around the high turnover. I know, again, in the minutia and in the weeds, talked to a principal at McClymonds today, can't find an English teacher, you know, working diligently with HR, working diligently with TTO, everybody. She's called to try to get that. And so, yeah, I mean, and so I'm thinking, okay, here's this continual problem. How are, again, thinking out of the box to resolve this problem? And so I just would like to see evidence of that. And I wish that these reports would actually kind of talk about those things, because this is really high level, great information, but we don't have time to kind of pick at, well, where isn't this working, or what is the percentage of things that are actually not, you know, why did you recruit 60% white people into the system this past year when we've been saying all along you need to do more around folks of color? So I don't understand why we say the same thing over and over again, and then we continually have the same behavioral patterns. It's not enough time. I mean, I wanted to know a little bit more about BITSA. I wanted to actually do a little bit of defense of TFA. That I think that they're actually trying to do some work right now around a Beyond 2 campaign, where they're actually starting to talk to TFAers about staying on board for 5 years. They're kind of, I think they're, you know, looking at data that says this is much better for a city and for the people. So I would just encourage my colleagues to meet with a guy named Tracy Session, I believe. I'm not sure his exact title, but, and then also Charles Cole. And they can kind of talk to you a little bit about what's there in TFA. So just kind of hearing Ms. Marshall speak to the fact of, like, we're nowhere near being able to tell them to go take a hike. But I think that we can work with them in some kind of real way. And then my last piece on that was, I wanted to just know if anyone could tell me how much money we actually spend on TFA. And yeah, that's a real question. Is it in here?
For TFA candidates, it's $2,000 per individual per year.
Okay. And do we have like a set aside budget amount? Are we spending like $1 million a year, $500K a year?
Oh, it's less than 100,000.
Okay.
We haven't finalized the amount for this year, but it's based on the number of individuals they bring into the district.
Okay. Yeah, because at one time we were doing like, we spent out blanket $1 million. Okay, so we're not doing that?
It has decreased over the last 5 years steadily.
Director Washington.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank you all for the work on this report. There's a lot here, and it's too much, obviously, to absorb tonight, but I appreciate the work that you put into it. I did want to request, though, when it comes back, because I do see that the recommendation of the Human Capital Data Management Technology System is targeted for the end of 13-14, so I'm assuming that that would come back to us in some sort of a report. And also, I was assuming that at the end of the year we would get an update on the different pilots that have been implemented and what's going to happen going forward. And I did want to make a request when it comes back to actually have some sort of a written report rather than just a PowerPoint that we could read prior to the meeting, because it's really difficult to glean any real information from a PowerPoint prior to the meeting, and then all the information comes right now. And it's just really, it's really difficult to come up with what the questions are and the information that we need to understand in order to make good decisions. So I'm just really asking that we start to think about what is the written document that comes to the board in a report. And this is actually a much broader issue for me than just this report. I really feel like I need a written report on these really big issues that we've got spaced throughout the year, so that we can really understand the issues and come to the meeting prepared with thoughtful questions and really get at the issues that we care about, because I think it's really doing a disservice to have a PowerPoint, because a few bullets really don't get at these really large issues. So that's one thing. I just want to run through my issues and then you can speak to it. I am concerned about what is the long-term vision. The only pilot that I'm really intimately aware of right now is the Teacher Growth and Development System pilot, because it's at Melrose Leadership Academy, which is in my district. I'm not aware of the other ones. That one I think is going really well at that school. The principal speaks very highly of it, and I think it's really getting at the Michael Fullen work of social capital. So I am feeling positive about that, and so that's great. I'm not sure how it all fits together, though. We've got 3 different pilots going on at different schools, at middle and high, and the whole 9 yards. I'm really wondering, how do we pull it all together? What is the long-term vision? What are the next steps? And how will we build teacher voice and principal voice into our decisions about next steps? And I'm wondering if we've thought about that, about getting their feedback on what is working and what is not, so that we end up with a good thing at the end. And then the final thing was, I saw the information about BITSA, but it looked to me like it's just a small subset of teachers who are actually receiving the BITSA help. And that conversation happened before I got on the board, but I do remember a really large discussion about BITSA. And so I was wondering who's actually receiving that, and how do we make those decisions about who's receiving BITSA and who's not. And that's it.
I'll report on a couple of those. One, just quickly on the reporting out, just to name, I believe we're scheduled for an April progress report around this topic as well in the plan, so that just in this fashion, as I understand it, though if there's a different ask of us, we are happy to oblige. And then additionally, in terms of written reports, that is the expectation of the Joint Study Committee. The MOU called for a final written report in May, so that will be a detailed report. Additionally, we came to an agreement that there would likely be a need prior to May, right, of some updates around progress, and that was where we came to an agreement of an initial report or a preliminary report in February. So those will be provided to both the OEA bargaining team as well as to the OUSD management and bargaining team, and we can make available. So to that point about reporting out. And similarly, we're doing some work in the leadership pilot of, jumping to the teacher and principal voice piece, both through the Joint Study Committee has helped to author kind of essentially a research plan that includes surveying, focus groups, one-on-one interviews with teachers and leaders. And I think you're right, it's hard to capture that in this PowerPoint. That will be reflected in those reports. Similarly, in the leadership pilot, we've engaged somebody who maybe many folks in this community know, Linda Treadway, who has supported our work from UC Berkeley, to do a study in partnership with another professor from University of San Francisco around both the efforts of the evaluation pilot as well as the implementation of the professional critical fringe structure, which was a related piece that came out. So we agree that, and that's part of our ongoing work right now, is making even midterm corrections in this work based on that feedback. So that's why in the leadership task force, we meet with them monthly to debrief, right? How's it going? How can we continue to improve this? And so that's, again, as well reflected in final recommendations. And then just lastly, I'll speak to the long-term vision piece. That is a piece for us to continue to engage with our labor partners on around where this work is headed. We have these current MOUs around these pilots that are specific to 13-14 this school year, but definitely for them, for us, or I can't speak for them, for us, it raises the question of where do we go from here. We know in terms of best practice around evaluation systems and our aspirations to be able to utilize information about performance in service of the deployment of our resources and supports to more effectively support our folks. It would be really great for us to have one system so we can have clean data. And so our approach to the pilots right now and the Joint Study Committee's approach is what's working in these different pilots, right? And not necessarily an approach of like choosing one or another, but what are elements that we're getting feedback from teachers and principals are effective to think about what kind of recommendation may come forward moving forward. So, Bitsa.
I'll just speak briefly to the BITSA question, which is it's more of a resource allocation. So we allocate the support based on credentials that are closest to expiring. So it's based on just the amount of funding that we have.
Okay, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the staff for compiling all the information. I want to personally apologize to the board regarding the lateness of the presentation. As we were running through it during cabinet, I strongly recommended a slight change in the presentation, well, a major change in the presentation to shape the presentation in the direction that I felt would be valuable for the staff. And that's one of the reasons it came late, so I accept responsibility for that. The larger question is around the question of reports versus the PowerPoint, because this has come up 2 or 3 times. And it's really a balance between providing a report for folks who like to read reports, and I know several board members prefer to read the report ahead of time, and then, so I'm wondering if the recommendation, and maybe the president of the board can give me direction on this, would people prefer to have a written report and no PowerPoint, or the PowerPoint and no report, or are you asking for both? Because to do both requires a different set of technologies and points of view. So I don't want to necessarily say that we have to have that discussion now, but I think that's I have to actually prepare that kind of shift. And I'm prepared to do that because I wouldn't personally mind a report myself, but it's a different format to have data for common sharing, and more difficult for the audience to have that kind of discussion, I think. As long as it's asked as an update to the superintendent's work plan, I'm personally fine, and I assume that this was an okay direction, because ultimately, the board will have to do an evaluation of my work, which is based on a report that I will present to the board, which will be a written report as to each documentation of each item. And I'm actually looking forward to the board presenting me that protocol for me to be able to do so I can begin that work. So I would just remind the board president that that's an expectation as part of my contract, that protocol and those dates be given to me so that I can begin that work. So as soon as that happens, I will be happy. I actually love writing. I'm happy to write you a confidential written report. So, but the bigger question, I mean, and that was just to tell you how I'm hoping to interact with the board in a positive, constructive way. I do think the question about the high turnover schools is one that really drives, is a provocative one for me as well as it is for you all. And I agree with you. I'm not prepared to wait for the human capital data management system to provide us for that, but I don't want to stop the work of HR. So at the risk of being overly ambitious, I would like to work with the board to identify a school where we understand high turnover to be a persistent problem, and performance as a result we believe to be influenced by that. And I'm prepared to work personally to do, say, a 5-year retrospective on those teachers so we can see the demographics of that school, the demographics of the staff, the longevity of that staff, the credentialing of that staff, and everything else. If you agree that we're going to do this with a single school, I would personally think that this would be intellectually interesting for me, and I would like to propose it as a project that we do collectively. I don't want anybody to like jump up and say, I volunteer my school.
I think it should be one per district.
Well, I'm just saying that that's asking a lot.
7.
I'm
Oh,
asking
see?
myself, I'm offering to do a case study of a school personally on my own time to respond to this question because I think that it is an intellectually important question. So if you're asking me to do 7 schools like this, I would ask you, well, what do you want me to take off of my my plate?
I mean, now, I'm sorry to go through the president. I mean, you put something out there that's pretty provocative around what you would like to do. If you'd like to choose a school, go for it and do that. If you want to do something that is a little bit more broader and collective, that will allow us to do some case study with some thoughtfulness to it, then I think we should have a discussion about that. I mean, maybe there's some students, maybe there's a core of people, a team of people that could actually be with you. You drive the methodology, however you want to do that. But to me, I think it would be important to actually look at why in D4 potentially you don't have a high turnover versus District 1 or District 6 or District 7. So there's,
Right.
I'm just saying, if you
Right.
want to go there, let's go there.
Right.
If not, you pick the school and decide what you want to do.
With all due respect, Vice President Hodge, I did not say I would pick the school. I would say I would like the board collectively to decide on a school. I will do a rough estimate of what I think the turnover and the performance data and so forth, and I will agree to personally take responsibility to do this project on my own time. It's not necessarily part of my annual work plan, but it's of importance enough to me and something I've been thinking about for a long time, when under circumstances under which I had no access to the data. As superintendent, I do now have access to the data, and I'm prepared to invest my own time in this. I think this would be unreasonable for us to begin a larger project because as those people who do research know, actually a single case study is as equally as valuable as a qualitative analysis as a multiple case study. The
Again,
idea
excuse
is
me.
to do an exploratory study with sufficient rigor to come to some conclusions, which then draw us to the research questions that then can be then evaluated by this human capital data system.
Excuse me, through the president, if we could actually just table this discussion, because it's not,
Okay,
it's
and then the
not gonna
final
be
thing,
decided on now.
the final thing that I actually wanted to share is this question about why teachers leave. I actually was able to reframe when I was a researcher to why teachers stayed. And so in 1998, several of us under the Oakland Education Cabinet did a study of why teachers stayed beyond 5 years. And so we looked at teachers between 5 and 10 years. And at that time, actually, the 3 reasons that people stayed was a sense of personal efficacy, a sense of value and leadership at their school, where there was collegiality at the school, and a reason to stay that was related to their social networks beyond the school. So if they were associated with family or church or other kinds of relationships in their community that gave them reasons to stay in the community sense, the professional capital sense at their school, and the sense of professional efficacy. Oh, and the fourth was a sense that the leader at the school understood and was leading him in the right direction. So those were actually the 4 reasons that came out of the case study. So thank you for letting me, for indulging me in those 2 areas, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you very much. We're coming up on an hour and a half, and right, and we haven't gotten to public speakers. So let me just, I just got a couple of things. It's really about follow-up. So first, next month on December 11th, at our next meeting, we're scheduled to, which we have done in the last 3 years, every December, is to establish the board's budget priorities for the following fiscal year. And in outlining these 10 deliverables for the superintendent for this year, there's, for me, it's sort of an assumption that that's probably hinting towards what those priorities are. And so we've dealt with special education, high schools, special education, effective teaching, continuous school improvement, and the results-based budgeting, and then the audit And those are kind of all pretty big ticket things. Is another example that Oakland has to do everything. And the, so this work that we're doing, as well as the other areas, but more focused around this building of a system, is directly tied, though the timing is not always in sync, is directly tied to exactly what Director Harris is getting at, is that the amount of turnover that we got both in school leadership as well as in the classroom, that we don't get, we're not able, practically you're not going to get the kind of traction, no matter how brilliant, how effective our professional development is. And so there's something about that, and I think the systems that are being laid out here begin to get us to that. So a couple of things. In the end of the school year, then we will be able to get a report about a substantial next step around the data management system, about what we're going to possibly purchase, what kind of data sets that we need to that we've settled on, and we'll be in the process of building, not pre-development, but in fact development. That's right. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Then in terms of the joint study committee between the district and the teachers union, Mr. Townsend, you said that we would get some recommendations or some sort of a summary evaluation about what we're learning from those pilots. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And those could conceivably turn into recommendations that may be of policy value or policy status for the board to take up. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And that would be sometime in May, June time period. Okay. And then the last thing is, Ms. Johnson, you had laid out these needs around professional learning and collaboration. And just, I mean, there are no dollar signs listed here, but I see boom, 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 dollar signs, you know? It's quite a bit. So as we move forward, next month the board kind of set some budget priorities. In January, the governor comes out with the budget. We have some sense of how much money we're dealing with. In February, we begin, I believe, the LCFF engagement process and the building of the local control accountability plan, and that there will be an initial draft budget from the superintendent sometime in the latter part of February. And so with that, again, depending on what we do in December, that this work here has got to be embedded in, if we adopt that as a budget priority, there's an expectation that we're going to see dollar sign somewhere, a prioritization. So I just want to make sure that we've got it very tightly linked, that from the superintendent's work plan to these updates to the budget process, that it is this, what do you call it? Not a train wreck, a train.
Articulated.
Right. It's all connected, and it's a linked process that we're doing. So I just want to highlight that for staff, but also for us, just to be mindful about that. So we want to get something done by the end of this school year in these areas. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation and your participation and your patience with us. Thank you. Ms. Floyd, we have speakers?
Yes, we have 8 speakers.
Okay.
Kitty Epstein, Killian Betlatch, Mark Tofola, Trish Gorham, Ben Tapscott, Carlos Rojas, Edith Verdin, Jim Mordecai.
My name is Kitty Kelly Epstein. I'm an education professor, and I have taught in Oakland and had a son who went through the Oakland schools. I want to appreciate the staff for the information that we got today and the board for its wonderful, right-on-point comments, many of which were the ones I was going to make. But instead of making them, I will connect them to say that all the issues that people have brought up are connected to recruiting diverse local teachers. If you recruit people who live in if you recruited 100 Latino teachers, and they mostly lived in East Oakland, those teachers would run into the kids in the neighborhood, and so there would be a relationship that would develop the kids academically. They would spend money in the community. They'd have a job, so more of our kids would be the children of employed parents, and they'd have a better relationship with the kids when they went in the classroom because they would be less likely to be afraid and nervous and out of place. All those things go together. And in addition, they're more likely to stay because they have the kind of network that Gary talked about in the study that he did. They have a social network. So all those things go together. And the reason it doesn't happen, I believe, is that people don't think it can happen. We can have a fully diverse teaching force that represents the people who live in this community. There are some barriers that make it difficult. A lot of them are financial, the cost of the test, the fact that a lot of people have to work for free for a year of student teaching. Those things are barriers, but they can be overcome. And that has been demonstrated by what Teach Tomorrow in Oakland has done, and it's been demonstrated by this program that Chris mentioned, which a number of people in this room went through, and they're still in Oakland. And I can point you to them all over the school district. A lot of the people who have stayed in the district and gone on to administrative positions are people who went through those programs. It can be done, and I think it's really important for the board to say those are the kinds of programs that we want because they're going to fulfill all those purposes, including the employment of the parents of the children in this district in teaching jobs, which are good jobs that last for a long time and have a pension that goes with them. So I'm so glad for all the questions you asked and all this conversation, and I look forward to more of it in January. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent. My name is Killian Betlock. It's my honor to be the principal of Elmhurst Community Prep. We have participated in the teaching effectiveness pilots, one of the 3 pilots you studied, since 2011. The first 2 years were under the auspices of the School Improvement Grant. This year, although we were not compelled to do so, our staff voted unanimously to opt back into this pilot. During that time, we've gone from hiring 8 teachers at the start of 1 year to 5 to 3. We have the privilege of living in interesting educational times with a lot of deliverables, a lot of priorities that are coming, whether it's balanced scorecard, school quality report, whether it's the 3 big instructional shifts. What the framework in the teaching effectiveness pilot allows me to do as a school leader is to connect those things, which exist at certain high levels, to the daily reality of what's happening in all of the classrooms in my building. To be able to say to teachers, here's where we are in relationship to those deliverables, to achieving those ends in important and meaningful ways. Here's where you are, here's where we need to go, and here's the next step. We have, in a small way, in our building with our staff, that data system that we've talked about around here's what our whole school, here's how our whole school and teaching force ranks on key indicators like the ability to use data to drive instruction, like the ability to foster academic discourse in classrooms. This pilot allows us to give teachers actionable feedback around improvement, things that go beyond you're a 1. Right? But on fostering academic discourse, your performance may be a 1. Here's how we get it to a 2 this year. Here's how we get it to a 3 next year. I think that the value we've seen in this is that we cannot survive and thrive a system where in schools like my Deep East Oakland Middle School, we either have teachers that are kind of hatched, fully formed, amazing teachers out of the egg, or burn out. We need to have great teachers that persist and continue to do the work. We need a great system that's equal to the challenge of developing them. I believe this is the foundations of one of those systems. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Ben Tapscott, I keep kind of seeing when we're going to hit the target. I keep seeing 2 administrators up there. One quick question is I'd like to know what percentage of Teach for America are minorities. We have a district that's 74% black and brown. And I don't know if the contract could be rewritten or not, but 6.9 million for school libraries. This thing here, I'm going to give you a copy of it, gives you some targets to shoot at. And I think that teacher turnover, money well spent. If we look at elementary, we got 69 elementary schools. So taking out the charter schools and looking at investing at the lower percentage performing schools would be a great place to start. And I also think that may show you some high teacher turnovers. If we look at the elementary schools, we have 18 in trouble. The bottom of the bottom if we look at APIs. If we look at high schools, middle schools, we got 9. The bottom of the bottom. Invest some money there. Maybe an hour after school and pay those teachers to work that hour, improving the reading and some of these common core things. High school, we got 8 at the bottom of the bottom. So I'm going to leave this with you, and if you take the time to look at it, and then the evaluation and all of that, and here are the superintendent's goals about more graduation. Attendance is the key. Back in the day, we entered into a negotiation, the teachers with the school district, to improve the attendance. And working with OEA, and you guys worked that out, it's a win-win-win. If we hit a certain goal and improve the attendance, we get more money. And part of that came back to us, the teachers, as a bonus. So that's something that the district could work out with OEA. And it works. It improves the students. It improves the parents, it improves the school, it improves the district. It improves the teachers. So that would be a target that you could look at and really do something, plus the teachers would get a slight bonus. I notice you keep shutting me off, but other people talk past their time. Yeah, thank you too.
Buenas tardes nuevamente. Bueno, mi nombre es Carlos Rojas, vengo de Fremont. No sé si es porque no entiendo muy bien el inglés y a lo mejor no capté bien la idea de la presentación que estaban haciendo ahorita.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Rojas. I'm coming from Fremont School. And I'm not quite sure if I quite understood that the meeting, what we're going to have today, was about.
Pero según lo que yo entendí, una de las preguntas que generalmente hicieron la mayoría fue, ¿por qué se nos van los maestros?
The reason, one of the questions that I did understand is why do the teachers leave the school?
Y la compañera mencionó que si no existe una fórmula mágica para tratar de retenerlos.
If there was actually a magical form that we could actually just keep the teachers at the school.
Yo voy a hablar como un simple padre, que yo no tengo ningún título universitario. Hablo como padre que tengo dos hijos en el sistema y viene un nieto en camino, viene ya entrando al sistema también un nieto. Entonces voy a hablar por esa experiencia.
Well, I'm just going to speak to him as an experience as a father. I have 2 children here in the school district, and I'm having a grandson coming up soon also. And I haven't gone to the university, but this is what I have to say.
Por lo general, los maestros, hay muchos maestros que vienen nuevos, pero vienen con muchos ánimos para trabajar en el distrito escolar de Oakland, pero a final de cuentas salen intimidados por la situación en la que están nuestras escuelas.
Actually, the new teachers that come in, they're actually looking forward to working with the students, but then after the school district, they feel like they can't move on or forward.
Otra razón es que el distrito escolar de Oakland es de los que más salarios bajos para nuestros maestros tiene.
The school district in Oakland is actually the lowest paying district that has been going on for the teachers. It's very low.
Pero aunque hay estas circunstancias en nuestro distrito, hay escuelas que han podido triunfar y han podido sobresalir.
But there's other schools that have been able to move forward and be able to excel.
Tenemos ejemplos como Life Academy, ICS, ya se me olvidaron las otras.
Example like ICS and Life Academy,
UPA,
Greenleaf.
Están en el mismo sistema y están en las mismas condiciones, en los mismos barrios que muchas de nuestras escuelas también.
They're in the same system and also in the low paying areas also.
Pero si ustedes pusieran, bueno, no estoy diciendo que no lo han hecho, pero nomás hago la observación.
Okay, I'm not saying that you haven't done anything, but I'm just as an observant, and I'm pointing out right now.
Si ustedes observan cuál es el común denominador en todas esas escuelas y el por qué en todas esas escuelas que han triunfado,
Just look at the common denominator of all the other schools that have succeeded and have excelled.
es el family engagement, es la participación de las organizaciones comunales, comunitarias, como por ejemplo OCO, como IBEIS, y también la participación de los padres. Esas escuelas tienen una base sólida desde el principio, desde su fundamento, con la participación de organizaciones y padres.
They actually mix together with the family involvement and also participation of the parents, and that help in with the fundaments of this to be able to succeed.
¿Por qué los profesionales, gracias por la presentación que dieron, pero por qué no voltean a ver ese punto? A los padres nos han hecho a la orilla, nos han hecho a un lado.
That the parents have actually, you pushed us away, and you don't have us just participating more as parents.
Atrévanse a ver ese punto.
Just look at that point.
Thank you.
Sí, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Edith Verdín.
Good night. My name is Edith Bardeen.
Y de la manera más amable les pido que si puedo cederle mi tiempo al señor Carlos para que acabe de explicarles el punto que para mí es muy importante.
Okay, I want to allow my time to be given to Carlos Rojas so he can finish his point of view, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so the board, the rules of the meeting is that is, we don't give time over to another speaker.
No permitimos el tiempo para otra persona.
Está bien. Bueno, entonces en este caso tendría que seguir, ¿verdad?, diciendo de que yo soy madre de familia, tengo una hija en Fremont y para mí es muy importante, ¿verdad?, lo que dijo esta señorita, la muchachita.
Okay, I just want you to know I'm a mother of, I have a daughter and she's in Fremont, and I just want to point out that the student that spoke earlier today,
de que tenemos que estar todos en comunicación, tanto los padres de familia como los estudiantes, los maestros y los directores, para saber las necesidades de las escuelas y podérselas comunicar a ustedes.
Now, I think that the collaboration of the parents, the teachers, the students, and the directors would be a good combination. That way we can actually mention and let you know what was lacking or what we would need.
Porque esto no se trata de hacer algo mágico, sino de algo real, solamente con una comunicación estrecha para que podamos mejorar la educación en Oakland.
I think the better communication would be a lot better to have within them so we can better the education here in Oakland.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Tafoya, the Policy Director for Great Oakland Public Schools. I just want to actually say a couple of quick thank yous. I want to thank the board for their leadership on this issue. Last time I stood before you, I think it was 11 o'clock on the night before school ended, where we asked for a $300,000, help support a $300,000 investment in this work. But there's also other folks too, OEA and their membership didn't have to move forward on this work, and they did. Killian Betlock, the principal at ECP, who probably works 90 hours a week, didn't have to stand here for 3.5 hours waiting to testify to tell you about the effects that this kind of work has had on there. And the teachers at Castlemont, Mellors Leadership Academy, and others didn't have to invest in this work and try to figure out if there's a better way to support them, to support themselves and support their fellow teachers, but they did, and they invested the extra time. Given the fact that the discussion you have is really rich, and instead of looking at a 20-minute discussion, we had an hour-and-a-half discussion. We talked about BITSA and coaching and career pathways and stipends and all kinds of stuff. And all of this, I think, actually begs the question for additional conversation. And so, in addition to the questions that I raised with you, with the board in a letter earlier this week, one possible suggestion would be to look at either an additional study session on this, coming up in January or February, because all these things, as another speaker raised out, they're all interconnected. And so developing additional knowledge and capacity and having the time to sort of dig into what BISTA does, dig in deeper into what TFA, like where TFA is at, where TTO has been and how they've contributed to the district overall is important. And it raises sort of a final question that I raised in the letter to you earlier this week is, what does success look like? What's the board going to be really happy with? And when the staff is able to come back and take a larger investment, as Dr. Kakashiba said, all of this investment is money. And so with a relatively minor investment of $300,000, what's going to happen next and what's success going to look like? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Trish Gorham, President, Oakland Education Association. And we're very pleased that through the last negotiations, we did commit to having this joint committee, to having the pilot programs, to negotiate and institutionalize authentic ways to grow teachers, to reflect on their practice that will lead to improved actions at the school site. I do have to remind everybody, though, that ultimately it is a negotiation process, but we are in there and we're with the district in moving forward. I would have liked, to the presenters, I would have liked, and I think you should see the Urban Teacher Quality Index. That was not provided in the packet, although a lot of information about the effective teacher was, and I think you need to be informed with the type of questions that are being asked and prioritized in order to reflect on what schools and teachers are doing to improve that it's using that model. I think I got a little short shrift. I heard the word leaders, teachers, principals, teacher leadership. We need to have a defined vocabulary because we're getting confused on all of this. And the teacher leadership, it seems to be a new category of employment that we have not talked about in negotiations and how they're paid, and we need to do that. Collaboration time is key to any professional learning, and to be most effective, it has to be provided during the duty day. How do we support our career teachers? It's those people that come in to teaching as a career that will do the work every day, like I did, and every first-year teacher get their kicked and come back the next day and try again. And that's what a first year is like. But if you have a first year like that and you don't have that support behind you, the principal behind you, and your community behind you, you will leave. And that's why teachers leave. They're not supported.
Thank you.
I want to just give one line to, there is a teacher teaching academy at Skyline. Let's support that. Let's grow our own.
Thank you.
Jim Mordecai, speaking as an individual, his mind. Board member Jody London earlier during this item pointed out that a lot of sort of teacher talk was being used and asked to clarify words so that the wider audience, the public, would know what we're talking about. That was a good thing to do. The process was wrong because this according to Robert's rules, you have a chair, and through the chair everything's supposed to flow, not from everybody that has their microphone on. That's just inappropriate. That's not really the rules of how you should be running your meeting. So if you wrote it on a piece of paper, that good information, Board Member London, could have been passed to the chair, and the chair would be appropriately could follow through on that. So we're talking about effectiveness of teaching. That's effectiveness maybe of what we do, or what the public and you do together. One of the things that's going to happen out of this evolves information, which evolves a system that you're going to use in the future. What we don't do in Oakland is beta test. So once you come up with what you have as the thing to do, you just jump into it, and then it's top down, demand that everybody fall in line and do what we know is the right path to take. Another way to do it is to take a small piece and go ahead and put what you think is the ideal and see how it works. and get feedback from the teachers, get feedback from the principals, and get feedback from the students too. It costs money to get feedback. To do the whole district at once, not a good way to go. Try beta testing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.